You're watching Enterprise Nation TV with O2 Business.
I'm an aerospace engineer by profession, so as a kid I was fascinated by aircraft. So through university I studied aeronautical engineering and then landed my first job, which happened to be in a company called NASA in the States, which was a fantastic place to go and live and work on the west coast of the States. I did that for just under a year, had a fantastic time, then came back to this country and decided that the IT industry would be the place where I wanted to actually forge my career. So I joined IBM, then as a systems engineer, which is basically a sidekick to a sales guy. And it's the classic story of going on sales calls, working with the sales teams, and then realising actually I could do this sales thing. So that's why I got into sales with IBM, got trained professionally with IBM sales training, which was first class. Went out into the field, successful as a sales guy in IBM, although in those days it was pretty easy because everyone bought IBM. Then my head got turned by what was then a relatively new company into the UK called Oracle. Joined Oracle initially as a frontline sales guy, had some success, was there for about 11 years and ended up sitting on the UK board of Oracle. And I'm very much goal driven, and those were some goals that I set myself. And I realised when I got there actually that this is what I wanted to be doing for the rest of my life. I'd done the corporate thing for about 18 years and I really had a calling to do something different, something where I could make more of an impact rather than just doing the corporate day-to-day grind, because every day was sort of groundhog type day. I could have done it for the rest of my life, I was very comfortable, but personally it didn't give me the challenge that I wanted. So I stepped out of that very comfortable existence at the age of 40, 10 years ago. And I set up my first entrepreneurial business, which was a wealth management business, completely different market. Basically working in the sports market. I have a bit of a sporting background myself. I knew quite a lot of people in sport and set out to build a company that would help them manage their money. And we were pretty successful. We grew it really quickly through organic means and through some acquisitions. That moved on about 5 years ago to allow me to do what I'm currently doing, which is what is now the Conga platform. So I've been doing this for 5 years or thereabouts, right. And it's been quite a roller coaster. Right.
So how have you got to the point you're at now? So you've launched the shopping site and you've raised £1 million in funding. So how did all that happen?
So go back 5 years. We started with nothing. We initially did some early stage funding, classic bootstrapping, friends and family type stuff. Enabled us to build a prototype. This is back in 2011. We raised a bit of venture capital then, just a small amount in early 2012 to take what was then bagthat.com. So it's a standalone platform. We took it for a live market test for 3 months in 2012. And that was really successful. We proved the concept worked. We proved that customers loved it. We got some really good interest then from suppliers right from day one. But we came at the back end of that, Dan, recognising that we needed scale. We needed audience scale for our particular model to work. Took the decision then that the way to explore scale or to get scale quickly would be to partner. And so at that point in time I started speaking to a lot of firms, big firms, people like Nectar and Money Supermarket, people like that. And I ended up in a very detailed discussion with Barclays. And to cut a long story short, we signed a partnership with Barclays early 2013 that basically allowed us to embed our platform into their mobile and online banking platforms. It was really challenging, as you can imagine. We did that for about 2.5 years, and we achieved the objective in terms of launching the platform. And we ran it with them for about 9 months. But then it became really obvious to us and to Barclays, actually, that to get scale through this model was really difficult in itself. And in hindsight, I guess it's pretty obvious. When people go to their bank accounts, they're usually paying bills or looking at their accounts rather than looking to buy a handbag or an iPad or whatever. So amicably with Barclays, we decided to curtail that in the middle of last year. And it was towards the back end of last year that I met with Will King, and we took the decision that we would relaunch the platform standalone under a new brand, which is Conga, and that only launched just under 2 months ago, so early days. But we're 5 years down the line, and it's been a real rollercoaster.
So that 1 million, was that raised for the new site, the CongaDeal site?
No, that was actually raised around about the time that we were with Barclays.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, you can imagine that for us to partner with Barclays, there were a lot of hurdles that we had to jump over to comply with what are very stringent guidelines, I guess, that Barclays had around security and availability and all of that. We had to comply with all of those. And we had to build an infrastructure in terms of people and processes to enable us to do justice to the Barclays environment. So we raised money before we went into that. And now we've come out of the back end of that. We've used some of that money, but we're off again standalone.
I mean, the fact that I know you've now moved on from the Barclays partnership, but to convince a partner like that, is great for an entrepreneur, and also to raise £1 million in funding. So those are questions that we get asked all the time. So how did you convince both the investors and Barclays that your idea was a good one? What sort of techniques did you use?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and what I'd say right up front that I've raised money multiple times. I must have raised 10 rounds in the last 10 years actually, and it's tough. Don't care what everyone says, raising money is difficult, and you have to. You can't fear rejection. You have to get yourself out there. You have to have lots and lots of discussions, and you have to kiss 1,000 frogs actually before you find the prince. But in raising a lot of money, first and foremost, what you have to have is a strong proposition. Obviously, you have to have something that holds water. You have to have something that not just you believe, but you have proof points along the way. So with the current business, we went through a whole process of doing some initial tests and some market tests, gaining analytics, gaining customer feedback as to what people thought, gaining supplier feedback, and that type of evidence became really important when you're speaking to venture capitalists or business angels in terms of what they're looking for. You also have to be really, really careful about projections that you make, because people see through those, and it's the easiest thing in the world to build a business plan that looks great in 5 years' time. And one thing I have learned, I think there's a military saying that no plan ever stands contact with the enemy. And you can guarantee if you're going down this route, in due course something will happen that will force you to go down a slightly different route. So it's really difficult to accurately forecast and plan. So you have to be very careful that you don't oversell things to investors, because particularly the venture capitalists, they will see through that immediately. When I look at Barclays, I mean, that's a tough nut to crack, because they're a big firm, they're a very, very successful firm. But the first thing you obviously have to do is you have to find ways to get to them, to speak to them, and speak to people at the right level. And I guess my background in sales gave me some advantages there. If you were to say to me, what is the most important skill that you have as an entrepreneur, I would definitely say it's the ability to sell. And part of selling is navigation into the right places in where you're trying to get to. So using whatever means you can, networks, friends, contacts, and being bold as well. Picking up the phone when you perhaps prefer not to, just pick it up, make the call, and find the way to the right people. That's the first thing. When you get to the right people, then it's all about the proposition and being able to convince them that you have something that can add value to their stakeholders. I was able to do that with Barclays. It didn't come easy. It took me about 10 months from start to finish to get a contract in place with Barclays. But having done that, then that was the path forward for the business at that time. As I say, you never know what's coming around the corner. And it lasted for 2.5 years. It didn't quite work out, but that's what this game's all about. Doesn't work out, suck it up and go and do something else that may work.
So you're now 2 months into that new thing, into the version of the business. So how's that gone, and what have been the initial challenges in that first 2 months?
It's the usual challenges. We have a very strong concept, and I can say that now because of the proof points that we have and the feedback we've had from all sides. Our two primary challenges today are quite simply, one is eyeballs. How do we get people to engage with us? Because there's a lot of noise out there online. How do you cut through all of that, and how do you get people to come and listen and understand what you do? The second thing is linked to that, and that is, in our case, what I call educating the customer, because we have a really innovative e-commerce concept, and people are conditioned to buy things in a certain way. And typically that is, there's a product, there's a price, take it or leave it. And if people think of an auction, they think of a rising auction. So here's a product, everyone competes, and at the end there's one winner who pays the most. Now our model is very different to that. We have an auction type concept, but rather than there being one winner who pays the most at the end, we have multiple winners who pay a much lower price. Getting people to understand that is really hard because people aren't conditioned to do it. But what we find is when people do understand it, the light bulb goes off and they love it, and they become converts very, very quickly, and they become repeat purchasers very, very quickly. So for us, eyeballs and education, those are the two things that keep me awake at night, and we work on it every day.
Without giving away all your secrets, what's your strategy then? Because like you say, it's a new concept. So I guess, all the usual things, social media, and but how are you communicating that it's something a bit different?
By any means we can, but again, we're not blessed with huge amounts of capital. We can't go and throw a lot of money at this, so we've got to be really creative. So clearly we use social media as a way to get the word out there. We use PR as the way to get out there. So last week we were website of the week in the Sun. Yeah, so things like that enable us to get our name out there. The other thing, obviously, we try and get people to refer people. Yeah, people have had a good experience. We get great customer feedback, and that's great in itself. But if people can then talk to other people about it, we're a site that's all about being social. The more people that get involved, the better the deals we can get, etc. So encouraging people, to do those types of things. So it's a real challenge, Dan. Yeah, to get your name out there, it really is. I don't think there's a magic bullet. We've started to work with Will King, yeah, and Will, the founder of King of Shaves, and he is great for us. He brings several things to the party. One of the first things he brought to the party for us was an affirmation, actually, about the concept. I actually saw Will present at an event, and again, navigated my way to him, sat down with him for half an hour, told him what we're doing, gave him the backstory, and he said, "Andy, this is fantastic. I've got to be part of this. I think I can add some value." So, Will brings a different perspective. He's very much a creative guy, a marketing guy. The new brand we've got, which is Conga, that's all Will's creation. And he really understands how to energise markets and energise brands. But really importantly here, you can't expect to work with someone like Will and just hand it over to him. Yeah, the world isn't like that. Yeah, Will provide great input, but it's still down to you as the entrepreneur to go and make that happen. And just use his skill, knowledge, experience to help you make better decisions, actually. And you're learning all the time.
I mean, that's something we go on about a lot all the time, about getting advice, and businesses that get advice statistically tend to grow better.
Yeah.
So is that something you'd advise other people? Maybe, not everyone can have Will King, but would you recommend, throughout your entire sort of entrepreneurial career, advice? How important has it been?
Yeah, advice, my father used to say to me a long time ago that there's no substitute for experience. And, I've been actually doing entrepreneurial work now for about 10 years. And throughout that period, I've met with loads and loads of people who have been there, seen it, done it, and they've just given me snippets of advice and information. And what you do is you gather all that together and you make your own decisions. And of course, by making your own decisions, you go down a path, and by going down the path, you gain experience yourself as well. So interestingly now, I find people coming to me for the advice, and I'm very, very happy to give that, because this is a tough world, and it's too easy for people to think that being an entrepreneur is easy. It's tough. You have to be resilient. You have to be so resilient. There are good times and there's a lot of really hard times. And unless you've got people around you who can support you during the good and the bad, it becomes very, very difficult to navigate your way through.
And just finally, what's your vision? So if we were sat here, maybe not here, but in 10 years' time, where would you hope that CongaDeal is?
Well, look, we're at a really interesting stage. We're 5 years old, so we've been going at this for quite a time. But where we ended up with now is we have a business-to-consumer platform which is out there at CongaDeal.com, and we're working with some great suppliers. We're getting an increasing number of customers, and it works. And we're going to look to ways to grow that as best we can over the coming period. That's what I would call business as usual. But what we've also got is we've got a fantastic engine, that actually could be plugged into any number of different e-commerce type platforms. It's very innovative. Nobody else does this. And so we're also exploring a B2B strategy where we can go and work with existing e-commerce sites or retailers and just bolt into their existing environment. They have an audience, they have product, and we're just a different channel that allows them to merchandise their items in a different way.